This artwork captures the essence of interstellar strife and unity in the face of an extragalactic threat. Subscribe for more tales from the cosmos, and like if you're captivated by this cosmic battleground. Dangerous, dangerous beings. It happened that it was the Grolinth who encountered humans first. And being the Grolinth, they immediately launched an assault. This proved to be a mistake. Our sector of the universe is vast, home to only a few sentient species capable of traversing the stars. Of course, foremost among them are we, the Islarans. As it turned out, unbeknownst to others, humans had quietly established themselves in a remote and largely unremarkable sector of the galaxy. Nothing extravagant, just a handful of settlements in the systems nearest to their home star. Crucially, they were completely unaware of the existence of the Grolinth or any other sentient species. One might assume that in an initial encounter between such an assertive is not quite right, let's say unyielding species like the Grolinth and humans, a relatively primitive race who had no knowledge of the Grolinth and certainly no experience in dealing with them. The humans would fare poorly. But that was not the case. Why? Let me explain, eager fledgling. Pay attention now, for here begins the history lesson, and it's a lesson worth learning. A Grolinth-armed reconnaissance team stumbled upon a small human settlement on a planet earmarked for resource exploitation by their overseer, which passes for their government. The settlement had only recently been established. A few years, perhaps a decade since the initial survey. As I mentioned, the Grolinth are unyielding. Upon discovering structures where none should have existed, they immediately initiated a campaign to destroy them. It's possible they did not realize these structures were built and inhabited by sentient beings. Species with semi-telepathic abilities often encounter such misunderstandings. In the case of the Grolinth, thoughts can be conveyed through pheromones. Due to their limited theory of mind, which stems from their ability to already know the thoughts of their own kind, they struggle to recognize sentience in other species. But I digress. They attempted to raze the human settlement to the ground. Well, they tried, but their efforts were thwarted. Fortunately, thanks to the advanced recording equipment integrated into the helmets of the Grolinth AR team, everything was captured and stored in real time on their ship's black box, much to the relief of scholars everywhere. That, along with human testimonies, provides us with a fairly accurate depiction of what occurred. The leader of the ERT unit approached the initial structure where, despite the presence of unidentified beings, humans fleeing in terror, he proceeded to set it ablaze with his arm-mounted incendiary device, swiftly reducing it to ash. The subsequent building was larger, a 2-story structure, but the Cowrith are sizable creatures. Standing 5 meters in length, though slender in width, they typically stand just under 2 meters tall on their 4 hind legs, utilizing their front limbs as either arms or legs depending on the situation. Their stature is imposing. The leader unleashed flames into the ground floor and then rearing up. To add to the devastation, bursts from the versatile laser mounted on his other forelimb followed. This harbinger of destruction, accompanied by his 19 team members, systematically dismantled the human settlement, largely unaware of the actual humans at this point. However, his attention was drawn to a departing vehicle from the settlement, which he disabled with a laser shot. Approaching to finish it off with his incendiary device, he discovered 4 humans, a male, a female, and 2 juveniles, a typical human family, for those interested in exobiology huddled amidst the wreckage. His recordings clearly show a moment of hesitation. Perhaps, being a unit leader, he possessed slightly more insight than most Calrith. Briefly, he paused, then raised his weapon to resume sterilization. It was then that he realized he no longer had his incendiary device, nor the limb to which it had been attached. A mournful screech escaped him as he processed his injury and retreated from the disabled vehicle. There, standing between him and the human family, beside his severed limb, stood another human, an individual clad in fully enclosing armor, who had stealthily approached and dismembered him before he even noticed their presence. This human wielded a large kinetic pistol and a sword, an actual sword. Calrith Commander gaped in astonishment, teetering on the edge of shock, with a few minutes left before succumbing to catatonia. Realizing he still possessed his combined laser mounted on his remaining arm, he aimed and fired at the human, who effortlessly sidestepped the beam. The human hadn't dodged the laser blast per se. Their reaction time was simply so swift that, in the span it took for the ATR commander to ready his weapon, take aim, and fire, the human had already anticipated the trajectory and moved aside. Such is the rapidity of human reflexes. The commander continued firing futilely, but it was to no avail. The last image captured by the helmet comm was a blur of motion passing beneath the unfortunate commander before he became the first casualty in the conflict between humans and Calrith. So who was this enigmatic human wielding a sword, and what brought him to that moment? Well, here's the remarkable part. He was there for the exact same reason as the Kamsu AR team. He served as an armed scout, accompanied by 4 others, dispatched to the planet to pave the way for an invasion. Humanity isn't a unified entity, you see. The faction that deployed these scouts was engaged in what they formally termed as war against the faction that had established the colony, aiming to seize control of the planet. This state of affairs wasn't uncommon. Human factions and their internal factions were almost perpetually at odds with each other. But here's the crux of the matter. While the Kamsu were armed to their fullest extent, prepared primarily for encounters with dangerous wildlife, the human scouts were equipped with what humans considered lightweight weaponry, yet sufficient to repel the Kalu-Kinsu. These scouts specialized in stealth operations, hence the inclusion of a sword. This particular sword featured a monomolecular, electrostatically bonded edge capable of slicing through virtually anything in silence. And it proved effective. The scout and his 4 companions managed to eliminate most of the Kamsu before they even realized they were under attack. Their active camouflage armor was also instrumental. It enabled the scout to approach the ERT commander unnoticed. Ultimately, the AR team found themselves outmatched. Only 3 of the Kalu-Kamsu survived out of the original 20, managing a hasty retreat back to their ship. Technically, they could have launched orbital bombardment on the colony, but in their shocked state and with severely diminished numbers, they opted to flee to their home territory as swiftly as their ship could carry them. Confusing, isn't it? It certainly puzzled me when I first delved into this. Intraspecies violence isn't unheard of course. Certain mating rituals even involve physical conflict, though typically without serious injury. The fact that humans engage in lethal conflict among themselves is startling enough, but organized warfare on a large scale? No other species exhibits anything remotely similar to human wars. Most conflicts within species, when not resolved through diplomacy, where negotiation usually proves more economical, are akin to mating displays of power. Why risk injury when it's simpler to determine beforehand who holds the upper hand? Perhaps it's due to humans' evolutionary heritage as carnivorous hunters. That, indeed, is highly unusual. Complex societies typically arise from herd species, or in our case, flock species that generally evolved closer to the lower end of the food chain, often as herbivores. This pattern holds true for most sentient species across the galaxy. We Amara primarily subsist on nutritious fruits found high in the canopy, where our flocks were once hunted by geohawks in the early stages of our development. The Calrith construct hives from wood pulp on their home planet and face threats from Mazu snakes when they venture out to gather fungus beneath tree bark. Each species carries ancestral memories of predators that once haunted them. And don't think I'm unaware of those occasions when you use plastic wings to cast hawk-like shadows to frighten others. It's not amusing. Yet, despite the existence of creatures on Earth, the human homeworld, that pose a threat to humans, yes, the thought alone is unsettling. The true fear that grips humans is something else entirely. Take a look at their media sometime. You'll find that while aliens or monsters occasionally appear, the overwhelming majority of violence depicted involves conflicts among humans. For humans, the greatest threat to their survival, aside from diseases, which is another grim tale altogether, has always been other humans. This is what makes them exceptionally dangerous. Forget for a moment that they are carnivores. Set aside the fact that they evolved both to hunt other animals and to survive predation by creatures even more ferocious than themselves. Humans are the only known sentient species in the galaxy to have evolved defenses against predation by other sentient beings. When you or I feel threatened, our instinct is to find cover, a vestige from our days as ground prey. It's a primal relic that persists in our hindbrain. Hiding was our sole effective defense mechanism against the geohawks. We don't instinctively flee or fight. If faced with a situation that demands such responses, it's challenging for us to override our innate impulse to hide. Our intellect might dictate one course of action, but our hindbrain insists on concealment. We've never encountered enough diverse threats to rewire this instinct. Similarly, the Calrith might rear up to appear larger when threatened, but they won't readily engage in combat if escape remains an option. Against their homeworld predators, such confrontations typically result in severe injury, if not worse. Humans, however, have taken instinct to unprecedented levels and beyond. Their response to threats has been continually refined and upgraded over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Since their primary threat has historically been other humans, their defenses have evolved alongside these threats. In addition to their physical evolution, their cultural evolution has also been deeply influenced. A significant portion of nearly all human cultures has been dedicated to producing individuals adept at killing other humans' warriors. In many cultures, these warriors form distinct castes, devoting their lives to honing their skills in combat. For further examination, consider the European knight and the Japanese samurai as archetypes of this phenomenon. If you were to ask a human, they would likely engage you in a passionate debate about which culture produced superior warriors. Although I advise against asking, they'll likely provide answers that won't make much sense to you and might disturb you if they do. Humanity evolved amidst a perpetual arms race. Imagine if, when we first developed hawk nets, the hawks had quickly devised a way to cut through them and countered every subsequent innovation we introduced. It's not a pleasant thought, yet for humanity, this has been the norm. The result is a species that is exceptionally quick, resilient, and pound for pound, incredibly strong. While they may not match the physical size of Kalukamsku, few species surpass humans in sheer capability. In a weaponless encounter, those human scouts would likely have had the strength to effortlessly disable the Kamsku. Most importantly, humans possess neural structures that complement their biological weaponry. Unlike other species in the galaxy, their evolution to combat other sentients necessitated not only physical prowess, but also advanced cognitive abilities. Some of the most iconic figures in human history are not those who engaged in personal combat, but those who employed organizational acumen and strategic brilliance in conflicts. Humans value intelligence in warfare nearly as much as physical prowess, and their responses to threats are remarkably intricate and adaptable. I suspect you're feeling quite apprehensive by now, and rightly so. I've painted humans as formidable killing machines, which, to be frank, is largely accurate. However, it's crucial to remember that they are also sentient beings capable of profound complexity. Did anyone notice the part of my narrative that seemed contradictory? The human scouts were indeed on that planet to attack the colony, yet they defended it when the Kalu Kamsku attacked. You might assume they aimed to preserve the structures intact or similar dilettance theories. However, the truth is far more nuanced. War, it appears, is not simply a brutal contest of extermination between factions. Humans, savage though they may be, are far from mindless in their conflicts. There are rules that distinguish warfare from mere bloodshed. These rules are intricate and often concern whom one can or cannot kill. For instance, enemies who lay down their arms and surrender are typically spared. Civilians, non-combatants of the enemy faction, are also supposed to be left unharmed. While these rules vary in application, there is nearly universal abhorrence towards harming juveniles. The human scouts may have remained concealed, as per their orders, if the Kamsku hadn't provoked them by attacking a human family with young. If you ever pursue cultural studies and engage with humans in the galaxy, and wish to avoid a fate akin to that of the Kalu Kamsku art commander, it's simple: never threaten a human child. There are other guidelines when interacting with humans, but adhering to this fundamental rule might allow you to navigate Earth or any human-populated area without risking bodily harm. I managed it during my student days. Just because a human can effortlessly end your existence doesn't mean they desire to do so. As for the aftermath of the colony incident between humans and Kamsku, the Kamsku dispatched a fleet to eradicate the perceived threat, still not comprehending the nature of the threat, and promptly found themselves in retreat against a unified human fleet. The scouts from one faction, aiding another settlement, facilitated a newfound cooperation, aided by surveillance footage showcasing terrifying alien entities recorded by the scouts. In fact, all human factions rallied together against the aliens. Despite their less advanced technology, human fleets outnumbered the Kamsku's combat vessels significantly. The sophisticated tactical maneuvers honed in human conflicts outmatched the Kamsku's straightforward strategy of advancing and shooting. The few ground skirmishes ended as massacres. Remember, the scout team that eliminated 4 times their number of Kamsku were considered lightly armed by human standards. It eventually occurred to the Kalu Kamsku to question why this relentless conflict was occurring. After thorough analysis, they recognized their new adversaries as sentient beings and finally reached out to humans to initiate dialogue. Surprisingly, humans were willing to cease hostilities and pursue peace. If anyone tries to dissect how such a deadly species abruptly halted the fighting, still a topic of debate in some scholarly circles, don't bother. The answer is straightforward. Humans had never encountered extraterrestrial life before. and they were captivated. As outraged as they were over the colony attack, they were more intrigued by the prospect of interacting with the first other sentient species they encountered. As I mentioned, humans are complex beings. Though they didn't glean much from the Kalu Kamsku, the conflict drew the attention of other spacefaring species in the galaxy, sparking a cultural exchange. Today, humans are scattered across the galaxy, studying various alien species and cultures, including some who currently reside on our world. In fact, with a bit of effort, if one of you were to kindly open that door right now, you should have seen the looks on your faces. The urge to dive under the tables would have been hard to resist, I'm sure. Apologies for the mischief, but it was too tempting to pass up. Perhaps think twice before donning those plastic hawk wings again. Regrettably, I don't have any deadly humans here to showcase. Even more regrettably, this concludes our lesson. It's probably for the best, as I could use a stretch of my wings. We've been here a while, haven't we? Judging by the looks of it, it'll be a few minutes before you all venture outside from under this sturdy roof. Nonetheless, what should we glean from all this? Well, that will be the subject of your assignment. But as a concise takeaway, I'll impart this: never engage in conflict with humans, if you can help it. And if you absolutely must, for the sake of all that's good, enlist other humans to do the actual fighting. It's what they excel at, after all.